Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help alumni to network and connect through their community groups, whether it be current college alumni, whether it be athletes, whether it be fraternities, sororities. We want to give them the place where they can effectively work together and help each other out. With the show, Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey, we interview former collegiate and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey out of sports. There's a major issue today with athletes transitioning out of sports, and we want to create a place where we teach and inspire athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. So today, we're so excited. We have Dave Holmes on with us. How you doing, Dave?
Great. Thanks for having me, Rob.
You're welcome. So Dave is a former college football player. He went to Northern Michigan University. And once he got out of sports, he's still in sports in the sense that he's a coach and a teacher. And then from there, he worked his way up through administration. And now he's the district superintendent for the Brighton Township schools in Michigan, Upper Michigan Peninsula. So Dave, we're going to talk a little bit about, I always like to start the show. Tell me about growing up playing sports, through high school into college and how that shaped you.
Oh, thank you. I have four older brothers, or three older brothers. I'm sorry, I'm the fourth, and they were always involved in sports. So it was something, it was family tradition basically to be involved. And I looked up to them all, and I wanted to be like them and try to one up them, as a lot of younger siblings do.
Absolutely.
So participated in baseball and basketball as a youth kid, and then in high school I was mainly a football player, with a football player on a basketball court at times, and then a track athlete, and that was mainly the throwing events.
Back in the good old days when we all played sports, and how, like, playing these sports, how do you think that helped to shape your personality and your skill sets?
Well, at an early age, for sure, you learn how to work together and cooperate, all of the traditional things you hear about sports and the benefits. But I think the grit kind of that it takes to be involved in sports, and we're a small school, so you're on the field or on the court, start to finish. And then just it was an opportunity to do things beyond what was at home. If there was chores at home and that kind of thing that needed to be done as a young member of the family, it was just that opportunity to get out and excel and enjoy some, really some good coaching.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so most people ask, did you dream about being a professional athlete? And if so, what sport?
Yeah, I was a pretty big kid as a youngster. My father was a really large man, so I think a lot of folks thought I was going to be as big as he was. So, that whole professional football thing, you dream about. Howie Long was my probably the person I watched the most. We lived in rural Upper Michigan, and we got one TV channel, so we watched a lot of NBC, which was AFC football. So I watched the Chiefs and the Raiders and the Broncos in their heyday, and it was great to watch and learn. Howie Long was the man.
Yeah, I was at one point I was a Raiders fan, but I think it was probably a little bit earlier. I was back in, I think, the Ken Stabler days and Cliff Ranch, all those guys.
Right.
So a little pre Howie Long. So yeah, I always talk about my dream of being a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, the talent wasn't there, so that's what I'm doing today, doing this.
Sure, exactly, and the same here. Had an opportunity to play some college sports, but certainly that was not in the wheelhouse as far as my skill level. Let alone, making a career out of it. So,
yeah, but hey, to play the next level in college is great. I ran cross country and track a couple of years, and then I got hurt. So let's talk a little bit about playing college football. And the one thing, the whole theme of the show is talking about ultimately that transition out of sports, whether it's out of collegiate or professional. Was there education when you were going to school around that? Of showing athletes about different areas that they can go after they were done with sports?
There was not a lot organized by the university, and I've listened to a few of the podcasts, actually almost all of your podcasts regarding this.
Well, thank you.
But I really think it had to do with the era as well as the mission. Like, our mission as players was always wanting to do your best on the field and prepare and do all the necessary things to do that. And I believe the coaches were so focused on, the next game or the next part of the season or recruiting and that type of thing. where I think it takes, and I realize this in my role today, it takes dedicated people. Like you have to have an alumni department association and people working on that day in and day out, because you can't do your day job as a coach and be the alumni coordinator for the district. You can certainly be a great liaison, but I didn't see that in my time frame, but I know they're doing a better job at it now. And I think they are across the country as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's more of a focus on now, but I guess the other side of it, maybe you could take that perspective, is I've talked to athletes about it, and they say the one thing is sometimes when you're in that zone and you're playing, I mean, you're kind of focusing on your sport. So even if there might be some opportunities to, provide that extra education, they might not necessarily pay attention to it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think that like they did initially with us while they were recruiting is they did do a good job at pairing you up with people in your career field. Like I still keep in touch with the individual that I met with on my very first visit to Northern. Just so happens to be he was a superintendent here, and with our local area. So I have that connection. But some of the things they did, I think, were focused on the long-term goal as far as requiring a study hall for freshmen to attend, making sure that they're doing the grade checks. They had a focus on that your degree was most important. I will say that, but
Right.
making those connections beyond, not so much. I think a lot of the rules around the NCAA and what they allow as far as connection with alumni and that type of thing maybe hampered that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, and obviously that's changed a little bit with, NIL, with name, image, likeness. And I think, I was talking to one of my podcasts, one of the former college football players as well, and he said he really wishes there would have been some type of a class or workshop, maybe like a 4-week or even a semester, where the athletes were kind of, forced to take it. So that being said, there'd be things that might resonate, in their future of for that. So let's talk a little bit about, you kind of touched on it. Let's talk about alumni engagement. So twofold. So the first question is going to be related to when you were at school and alumni engagement, and you did talk about the obviously issues with rules and things like that. So talk about that when you were playing, and then also the second part of it, talk about it now as an alumni going back.
Okay, well, again, during my time frame, again, the early 90s, there wasn't a whole lot of organized structure to bring an alumni back to speak to the students or the athletes or that type of thing. They are, I think, doing a better job at it now and looking to connect. Northern Michigan has a great tradition of history. We quickly discussed the other day, they went from their storied program of 0-10 to 10-1 in the national title in Division II in 1975. And there was that series of coaches and series of players that were networked to the university and still have a great, connection today. And what they're doing now, I think, a better job at. They've gone through some real tough times as far as wins and losses. And a new coach is a former teammate of mine. They're bringing back some of those folks that are big name folks that are connected to Northern and trying to get that network of alumni there to support. And not just financially, just to start talking about Northern again, start talking about bringing kids back there and getting recruits there and all the necessary things. And they do some great things for the university. And I know I see on the horizon, if it's not already happening, that there's going to be more connection with the alumni to the players. I just see that from the current coaches and the things they're doing with their alumni.
That's great. And I think you kind of hit it. It's a lot of it falls back on, whether the athletic department and coaches. I know in talking to some people, they say, you've got that culture, and then all of a sudden, if there's a changes in coaches, then that kind of might go out the window. And I think it's important to bring alumni back, and not just in the typical, okay, they're going to come back and have a golf tournament with fellow alumni or even some of the student athletes, but more to your point of just working with the athletes and whether it be helping them in their careers or just mentoring them. I think it's really important to get that alumni involvement.
And I will see it in my own career as an educator. Northern has really been known. They produce a lot of teachers, and as you know, there's a teacher shortage across the country, and within our state. But they really are making a point of bringing us back and we're doing mock interviews with the kids involved in the education program. They're making connections that way. They want to know if you're a Northern alumni when you're participating in these events. They're reaching out and doing those things. There's a new president. The president's kind of doing all the necessary things to reach out and connect with the region. And I think that'll carry over into their sports connections as well, as far as, looking at nurturing these athletes. And the course thing you discussed, there are so many courses that you have to take as a college student anyway, that can be an elective. It would be ideal to have this as far as, units with financial literacy and all the things that, you're transition out and, take care of your body and all the things necessary.
Yeah. And that's some of the things we've talked about. I know, I talked a little bit offline about just working with the schools and their athletic departments and putting together a team of resources, the mental health, financial literacy, athlete transition coaches, people that help network and connect, and giving that help for these athletes as they transition out of sports. And kind of another question that came to mind, along with that education at the college level, talk a little bit about, are there things that are being done now, maybe at the high school level, where there are programs like this that ultimately will help athletes as they look to their future?
Yeah, athletes and just students in general, we're actually investigating more of a leadership type course to implement as an elective within our school. I mean, we want great leaders. You don't just get born to be, you're that natural born leader, but you may have those characteristics, but if you don't hone those skills and have good mentors and good systems in place to learn those things, I think in the schools is definitely a great place to learn some of that and teach it and make it part of our curriculum, as well as specifically for our athletes or students involved in other clubs or those types of things.
Yeah, no, that's great that they're looking at it. Are there sports management classes in high school?
Not technically, but we have the ability in our state. We have the ability to do some independent study type things that are basically work-based learning, and we kind of tie that in through a marketing course, do a work-based learning. Like, say you want to shadow an athletic director, that would be an opportunity. You'd have some flexibility to be able to do, and I'm confident there are places that do, but at our district, we don't currently, but we have the ability to do that through some of the marketing type courses.
Right. I want to talk a little bit, and we touched again on this, but let's talk about NIL, name, image, likeness. And a lot of people kind of attest right now, kind of being the wild, wild west. So give me your thoughts, positive and negative, I guess, both from a perspective of from a college athlete and then also from a high school athlete.
Well, certainly if an athlete or a young, individual has the opportunity to make an income, there's a benefit to that. If they, the things that athletes have to do as far as time, effort, energy beyond the classroom, it doesn't allow you as much time for a job. And I was one that, because of our financial circumstance, had to have a job. Probably 30 years ago, the coaches maybe didn't realize it was an NCAA violation or whatever it might be, if it was. But if I didn't have a job during college, I would have been able to make it through. And I think within our team, if you look at that, there was students, if it was a Division I program, certainly would have had that opportunity. And I look at it as a lot of those folks, maybe that would have been their opportunity. If you are not permitted to get a job by the NCAA regulations, you have the ability to earn some income. I think there's some potential drawbacks with that whole disparity in the team. The component of this person gets X, but you kind of have that with scholarships. You have some people on full rides and some on partials and some as walk-ons,
Right.
and they all come together and work together for a common goal. So I think kids are pretty doggone resilient and can navigate that. But those are the challenges I would imagine these college coaches are having to work through. And I know it's not only Division I now. You have these smaller schools that are picking up some NIL things, and even high school students.
Right. Yeah. And you talked about it. Do you think do you think it affects teammates? I mean, like you said, I mean, there's disparities in scholarships as well, but with all the focus that some of these players might have on NL, does it take away from the team and the competition at all?
I think it could, and that takes a great leadership involved in the coaching staff and that type of thing to navigate that. Kids now, and adults as well, I guess, anything digital is getting monetized. So they want more likes on a Facebook page or whatever, Instagram page or whatever it might be. They want more attention that way. Eventually, that's kind of how they feed into the attention and potentially marketing. And I think it's just more native to them than it might be for folks our age.
Right.
And I think they're pretty doggone resilient and can navigate it.
Yeah, and I think the part of that also with the social media is you hear stories about, and I don't know if maybe they're becoming less frequent, but like some of these, like anybody young, I mean, people make mistakes, and but you hear these stories of things coming back to kind of haunt some of these athletes, or not just athletes in general, just youth in general, where they made some comments or did some things on social media. Is there a move to better educate, and is that done at the high school level?
Somewhat. We do a lot of that through our either an advisory course when they're younger in middle school, that type of thing, just as far as responsibilities as opposed to rights, those kind of type things that come into play. But also, our coaches, I think, do a real good job about managing that, what the handbook or the code or whatever it might be should happen. And certainly, we're dealing with a lot of young individuals. Kids are going to make mistakes.
Right.
And say something or post something or do something that's not okay in a school setting or whatever it might be. But there's a pretty high focus on that. And then it really comes down to, in the moment, right? You can't control every last thing. You have a pile of kids involved in a team and or a program or a school district. We grew up at one time when we didn't have the things that they have to record or video or say those things,
True.
But I think there's a heightened awareness, certainly, and it's communicated quite a bit by our staff and families too. Families
Right.
have a big impact on that.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, obviously, I always talk about. I told my kids never put anything in writing that you didn't want somebody that could potentially see it. So that was like old school, kind of before the whole social media boom. But I think it's definitely a need for education. People are still going to make mistakes. It was interesting. I was talking to somebody on one of my recent podcasts, and she was talking about how they were at an event and the team had just won a championship, and so they're all gathered around, and one of the star players had a beer. I mean, he was 21, but she immediately kind of grabbed it from him before they started like taking all these pictures in social media, because it was an optics issue. And I think that's the problem too, with social media. I mean, it's fantastic to promote things, but then you also have to manage the potential downside too.
Right. And I think one of the difficult things for an athlete is dealing with maybe the trolls that are out there that are saying, you got even a 22-year-old kid out of college, you have to realize they're out there pouring their heart and soul and doing something. And then you have, fan from XYZ getting on their site and bashing them for a game performance or that type of stuff. So that's another difficult thing, I think, with the social media piece is what the athlete has to navigate if they put those sites out there. You open yourself up for a lot of criticism as well.
Yeah, and that actually, I just thinking of something else kind of related to that. I was talking to somebody recently talking about bullying, and I'm sure this is a big thing that you deal with, in the school system. But it was interesting because more perspective. I mean, typically in the past, it would be a lot of what you think that whether you want to say the people that thought they were cool, or the athletes might be bullying some of these other, people that might have been more quirky. But it's interesting. She kind of flipped the narrative and said that there's a lot of athletes or these like supposedly popular people that are getting bullied.
Yeah, I can see it, and it's so if in our day and age it was in one ear and out the other. I think at certain times because it was said, and when it's in writing, it's there. If it's digital, or video or whatever it might be, there's a lot of that. So I will say this, there are a lot of really, really good things in place nowadays that really educate people about being more, receptive and tolerant, and just overall just being nice. And I think because it gets put in the media often, that it oftentimes kids nowadays or groups might get, that bad reputation when it's not necessarily deserved.
Right. So let's talk about transitioning out of sports. So, you grew up playing sports, you loved it. I mean, I was the same way. And now when it was time to, to stop after college, talk about, how that affected you, and maybe give some advice to other athletes as they get to that journey, whether it's college or professional.
Sure. So, it was a good transition for me. I would look at it as a long transition from high school, because I wasn't your typical, maybe the folks are interviewing. I wasn't the star athlete, even on our college team. I was a special teams player, a backup. So you kind of, I was fighting and trying to get those starting positions, but just the ability, as far as my role. So I didn't have that huge drop off, and, you're the star, so to speak, and then you're a nobody when you walk out the doorway. And then being involved in education, gave me a clear pathway into coaching. And, both schools I worked at, I was involved as a coach before I became an administrator. So you have that ability to scratch that itch, so to speak, as far as being involved in sports. So that piece was really nice. I think the things that really I would hammer home from my experience is that college and high school as well, and the people you were around, taught me so much about how to be, a leader in my field. And it gave me the grit, I think, to just make those big decisions and move forward, and really kind of drive forward into more of a leadership position as an administrator in the district. And I think those things really, because of those foundations, I maybe either had an easier pathway, or was more willing to do the work necessary to get those things done.
Yeah, and I think one of the key words there you hit was leadership, because I know you look at the DNA of an athlete, and just everything, the skill sets, and a lot of companies, and that was one, and I think we talked about, you might have even listened to that one, but one of the other guests talked about just imploring athletes, like, look, use your skill set. People want to hire that. Like this guy went on to be a CEO of several different Fortune 500 companies, but he just talked about the drive, the persistence, the leadership, the preparation, practice, everything that goes into being an athlete on a daily basis, and utilizing that. So we definitely want athletes to know, it's just, when you're done, it's a lot of people talk about, okay, I'm Dave the football player, I'm Rob the runner, I'm Billy the basketball player, Susie the tennis player, but you're a person, and you got a whole lot of life ahead of you. Right. And that's what we want to teach people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those things, in any job, you're going to have difficulties. Everybody has, you solve problems basically, one way or another. You work in either service industry or manufacturing, whatever it might be. You're solving problems to try to gain a profit, or try to do a better job as a school, in my case. And having the grit from sports really helps you to work through those really, really tough times, whether it's financially or tough times as far as tough decisions that are maybe not necessarily unpopular, but you do your homework, and you can, I've never really kind of felt like I needed to explain a decision. I needed to explain how I arrived at that decision, right? If it's a difficult decision, if you can explain how you arrived at that decision, most folks can live with what the decision is.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. So talk about, a big part of what, what Alumni Direct is about is the networking, connecting. And I've talked to some agents where they've said that, the best time to network and connect is when the athletes are still playing. So give me some thoughts on networking, connecting, and even down to the high school level.
Well, I have two daughters. I share with my own daughters, and I share with kids all the time. Never underestimate that importance of networking. Really, that whole piece of, you know a certain thing within your career. You learn a certain thing in your undergraduate education or high school, but you don't memorize it all. You may have to memorize it for a test, but then you have to be able to go out and apply it and work with people and get along with them and have them. Everybody wants to be on a winning team, right? Whether it's in a workplace or on a sports team. So if you want to be on a winning team, you got to be a good teammate. You got to be able to, demonstrate that you're that type of material, right? For that certain company, you want to be the type of person that they want to hire, and that personnel skills and networking and just being able to be relatable, I think, are very important. And for me, I look at it as in my career, being able to expand upon beyond the walls of education. I've started to, over the past 10 or 15 years, serve on some boards within the state and locally that really helped to hone my skills as a administrator. And you can learn a lot from watching others and observing and listening and being part of those things and being part of those decisions that take place on things like those boards. So
Yeah, it's so important, and I think you just think about it all about having a spirit of helping others too. Kind of paying it forward when you are networking. It's not all about what's in it for you, but how can you help other people? And I think the learning starts at a young age. I mean, it's just not being afraid to listen to your teachers, coaches, parents, other friends, and just build that through high school and college, and it become part of your daily life of just working together and helping others. So let's talk about so today you're doing some great things in education, and it's education is so important to people. I know from my wife's been a teacher for many years, and you have an opportunity to impact our youth all over. So talk about some of the things that you're doing today in your role.
Well, as a district superintendent, you have a greater influence on the direction of the district, but you're not as closely connected with the kids, as far as day in and day out, like a classroom teacher, or even a building principal. But in my own personal experience and in our district, having been a teacher, having been a principal in the district, really helps me to stay connected to those kids and being involved in their events. I look at all of the extras of the evenings, going to games and concerts and programs. Some community members will walk by and say, "Man, you guys put in long days. You have to be at all these things." And I look at that as I get to be at these things. I get to be at a football game. I get to go to a tournament game as part of my job. I get to go to watch an awesome play or a concert. So there's that reach. That's very gratifying, I guess, as far as seeing those kids perform beyond what's happening in the classroom. And then, certainly around the community. I've been in this district for 25 years now, so you certainly gain a network of folks that and they trust you. That's really a good feeling to have that trust from the community.
How do you root for you got the whole district, so you got these teams playing each other? Is it you have to play favorites there? How does that work?
Well, actually, we're a single building district, so we have a single high school of about 600 students, a single middle school of about 600 students. But there was a time we actually had, when I was a middle school principal, we actually had a couple of teams in basketball that would play each other. So we'd just cheer for the kids. That it's all about the experience and great opportunities. It's one of those things when we compare sports to work, and we talk about this quite a bit at the end of each year. It's like when you work in a school, it's unique in the way that the year ends. You really kind of have to tie things up. The year ends and the kids go home, and as a principal, I'd watch the buses pull out of the parking lot, and you kind of get that feeling like we just won, right? And it's like you win every season. I can't think of any of the 26 years, there's 25 in this district, that I felt like at the end of the school year, we lost that season. And when you're a athlete, it's a pretty good likelihood, if you're successful, you're going to end your season on a loss. Only the champions end with a win, right? So
Yeah.
that's always that. I think that's a great motivator. but it's always something that you feel at the end of a season. And when you're in a school, you know, top to bottom, start to finish, when you finish that season, you feel like you won.
Absolutely. So any fun stuff in the future after what you're doing or along with what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say I'm learning the value of networking now. I'm a pretty modest person overall, where I don't feel like, you know, I have a Facebook site, but I use that for my own personal use. We market as a district. All my energy's been into the district I work at. But I know that this isn't the last chapter in life, right? So as I move out of education, eventually there'll be other things I would like to be able to do, whether it's consulting or doing something else within another business or that type of thing. Beyond my years as a administrator. But I think the biggest thing I would say and encourage your listeners, if they're not involved, is find ways to get involved in your community or serve on boards or those types of things. They've been such great learning experiences for me. I served on a Principals Association board for the state of Michigan. I got on a local hospital board when it wasn't a popular time to be on. They were going through some real tough times. And the things I learned in sports or in my career really helped me to have the determination to kind of see that through to where they were out, you know, at one point almost not making it, to them becoming financially sound and merging with another organization, that type of thing. So it's just, you can't underestimate the value of those experiences and how they might impact you long term.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Well, this has been great. We really appreciate your time, and I think we encourage listeners and viewers to. There's so much that can be taken out of the sports, your sports journey, and we really encourage you to pick up on different nuggets like Dave shared today, of just things that can help you moving forward, because there's many years ahead and great impacts that you can have. You can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can follow the show on our YouTube channel, also on all the major podcast networks. And we really want to make a positive impact in helping athletes transition out of sports. So once again, thanks, Dave. Really appreciate the time today.
Thank you for having me.
It was our pleasure.